In the late 18th century, when empires crumbled and invaders fought back and forth across South Asia, Shah Latif did something more permanent than any king. He listened to the soul of his people. He took their folk tales, their sorrows, and their music, and he wove it all into verses. He didn't write for princes in Persian. He sang for farmers, fisherfolk, and weavers in the rich language of the Sindhi countryside. Shah Abdul Latif was born in 1689 in the small village of Hala Haveli near the mighty Indus River. He was born into a family of Sayyids, descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, a class expected to be religious scholars and community leaders. But from the very beginning, young Latif seemed different. He was a quiet boy, introspective and deeply sensitive. While other children played, he was drawn to the company of wandering ascetics and minstrels, the fakirs and manganhars, who traveled from village to village carrying news, legends, and songs. His family, concerned for his orthodox education, sent him to formal schools, but his heart wasn't in the study of logic, grammar, and rhetoric. His focus was on the banks of the Indus, in the songs of the boatmen and the women grinding grain. The story goes that his father, troubled by his son's unconventional interests, once took him to a gathering of esteemed scholars. They were debating a complex point of Islamic law. After listening in silence, the young Latif reportedly stood up and recited a simple Sufi couplet about the purity of the heart. The room fell quiet. It became obvious that his wisdom would not come from thick books, but from the thin, clear air of direct experience. He was a born mystic, and his maktab would be the land of Sindh. In his late teens or early 20s, driven by a spiritual restlessness, Shah Latif began a series of long solitary journeys. For years, he wandered all across Sindh and into neighboring regions. He slept in dusty villages and on river banks. He talked to shepherds about the stars, to potters about the clay, to fishermen about the moods of the river, and most importantly, he listened to the people. He absorbed the ancient folk stories that were the common inheritance of Sindhis, regardless of religion. He heard the tragic epic of Sassui, the low-born woman whose love for a prince defied caste and ended in loss. He learned of Sohni, the potter's daughter who drowned each night swimming to her lover, holding on to a fragile clay pot. He heard the tales of Leela Chanesar and Momal Rano. These weren't just romances to him, they were sacred metaphors. In Sassui's desperate trek through the desert to find Panno, he saw the soul's lonely journey towards God. In Sohni's drowning, he saw the necessity of surrendering the ego to reach the divine beloved. He also immersed himself in the music. The sur, which is a distinct musical mode of its own scale and mood, became his vocabulary. Each story was tied to a sur. Sur Ramkali for sorrowful separation. Sur Yaman Kalyan for the beauty of creation. He didn't just write poems, he composed them to be sung. By the time he returned to his homeland and settled on a sandhill, Bhit, near Karar, he had become an archive of Sindh's collective spirit, and from that hill on which he settled, he got the name Bhittai. The result of his life's work is the Shah Jo Risalo, or the Book of Shah. It is not a linear narrative or a philosophical treatise, but a collection of 30 surs. Each chapter of poetry is built around a central melody and a core folk tale. The Risalo is full of references to the landscape and natural world of Sindh. His genius was in turning the local into the universal. A Sindhi farmer hearing about Sohni's clay pot understands it literally because he knows the river's currents. But through Shah Latif's verse, that pot becomes a metaphor for the human body, which is fragile and temporary. The lover on the far bank is God. The act of swimming is the path of devotion. The drowning is the glorious annihilation of the self in the ocean of the divine. Bhittai took a simple love story and revealed the deep Sufi truth hidden within it. He taught that true love is an all-consuming journey that ends in the death of the individual ego, fana fi illah. His language is simple and powerful. He writes of the desert's thirst, the coolness of the first monsoon rain, and the loneliness of the bird separated from its mate. He uses the loom, the boat, the plow, and the spinning wheel as metaphors for creation, life's journey, and hard work. His poetry is rooted in the physical world, but its goal is to lift people into the spiritual domain. He was a Muslim saint, but his vision was breathtakingly inclusive. He revered the Hindu deity associated with the Indus, Jhulelal, and saw the same one God in all faiths. He once wrote, "The same Lord is in the temple as is in the mosque." For him, the Hindu, the Muslim, the Sikh, all were thirsty travelers in the same desert, looking for the same oasis of truth. In a time of increasing religious and political conflict, his poetry remained a language of inclusion. Shah Latif's personal life was a perfect enactment of his poetry, simple, sincere, and detached from worldly pomp. After his travels, he lived a life of remarkable austerity in a small settlement on the Bhit. He wore simple clothes, ate little, and spent his nights in meditation and his days in composing poetry and receiving visitors. His khanqah was open to all. He was a practicing farmer and often worked the land with his hands, believing in the dignity of labor. He married a noble woman named Bibi Saida Begum. It had not been easy to win her hand. Her father, a local landlord in Hala, had refused to permit the marriage while he lived. During his travels, when Shah Latif arrived in Thatta, he met the Sufi saint Makhdoom Muhammad Moin. This wise man understood the inner condition of Shah Latif and asked him to stay for a few days. He then told him, "The truth for which you are wandering around is inside you. A man is a mirror for a man. You have seen God's manifestation in the hand of that girl." After a few days of living with that Sufi saint, Shah Latif understood. By the time he returned to Hala, the landlord had already died and he married the love of his life, Bibi Saida Begum. But their earthly life together was not to last very long. Bibi Saida died within a few years of their marriage. Shah Latif never married again. He had a deep relationship with the Manganhars, the caste of traditional musicians. He gave them his poetry and they gave it voice and life, setting his words to the surs he designated. This partnership raised the status of the musicians in Sindhi society. Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai died on the very hill he lived on in 1752. His urs at his shrine in Pit Shah is one of the largest cultural gatherings in Sindh. Today, the Risalo is sung everywhere in Sindh. The sur system is the foundation of all classical Sindhi music. The tamburu, a long-necked lute that he loved, is a key instrument for Sindhi musicians. He is honored with equal devotion by Sindhi Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. Politicians quote him, activists use his verses for resistance, and families teach his poetry to their children. His poetry offers a complete way of being. It teaches resignation in the face of hardship, sabr, the importance of honest labor, mehnat, the nobility of the poor, and the transformative power of love. He championed the marginalized, giving voice to women like Sassui and Sohni, making their pain and courage central to the spiritual narrative. And so it was that Shah Latif Bhittai taught us that the divine speaks in some very local accents.